Starting from this lesson, we'll show you how to create our own promise objects. Usually we create our own promise objects by newing the promise constructor. Every constructor has the obligation to prepare a prototype object for its instance objects to inherit. Let's open the promise prototype and see what's in it. We can see the then, catch, and finally methods are all stored here. As a result, the promise objects will automatically inherit them. The promise constructor also has a length property. Its value will always be 1. 1 represents the number of arguments the promise constructor needs. The promise constructor only needs one argument. That argument is a function, and we call it the executor function. Whenever you new the promise constructor, you must provide that executor function. Let's create our first promise object. We create a variable, PO. We use PO to store the promise object. We new the promise constructor and pass the executor function to it. The executor function takes 2 callbacks as its arguments. The first one is called resolve, and the second one reject. You'll learn what they can do later. Let's output the new promise object. We can see it has inherited the then, catch, and finally method. The next question is, how do we control the 3 methods? To answer this question, you need to learn a new concept, promise state. A promise has 3 states: pending, fulfilled, and rejected. Pending is the initial state. Fulfilled means the async operation this promise object represents has succeeded. Rejected means that async operation has failed. A promise can only go from pending to fulfilled or go from pending to rejected. There are no other possibilities. Once a promise has reached the fulfilled state, the then method will be automatically triggered. Likewise, once a promise has reached the rejected state, the catch method will be triggered. A fulfilled or rejected promise is also called a settled promise. Once a promise has been settled, the finally method will be triggered. So how do we change the promise state? We use the resolve and reject function. The resolve function will fulfill the pending promise. The value we pass to it is called success value. The success value will be sent to the callback of the then method. Now the then method will be automatically triggered. Its callback will receive the success value. Let's test the program. We can see the then method has been triggered and it has received the success value. Let's open the promise object. The browser will use different terms to describe a promise object. For example, the promise state will be called the promise status. The fulfilled state will be called the resolved status. The success value will be called promise value. Next, we disable the resolve function and try the reject function. The reject function will create a rejected promise. The value we pass to the reject function is called failure reason. We use it to tell users why the operation has failed. Because we haven't yet set the catch method, we got an error message. We can see after we set the catch method, the error message is gone. The catch method has received the failure reason and output it. Both the then and catch method takes a callback as argument value. Actually, these 2 callbacks have their own names. The callback in the then method is called onFulfilled because it will be triggered when the promise has been fulfilled. The one in the catch method is called onRejected. The finally method will be triggered once the promise has been settled. It does not care about whether the promise has been fulfilled or rejected. Its callback is called onFinally and will not receive any external value. The catch method is actually a shortcut. The then method can take 2 callbacks. The first one is for handling the fulfilled promise. The second one is for the rejected promise. We can see the second callback in the then method has caught the failure reason.